My whole world fell apart the moment I saw who was sitting beside my son in that car, and when I heard what they were saying about me. My name is Lydia. I am 62 years old, and I never imagined I would discover such a cold, heartless plan made by my own family. It started that afternoon when I decided to surprise Javier, my only son. I had baked his favorite dessert and wanted to take it to his office to make him smile. When I reached the parking lot, I spotted his silver car parked in a distant corner. A playful idea made me grin like a child. I would hide in the back seat and scare him when he came back. The car was unlocked, so I quietly slipped inside and crouched low behind the front seats. My heart raced with excitement as I imagined his face when I popped up with the chocolate cake he had loved since childhood. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, listening to every sound around me. After a few long minutes, I heard footsteps. The doors opened, and Javier sat down in the driver's seat. Then someone else slid into the passenger side. It was a woman. At first, I assumed it was a coworker, until I heard her voice. It was Raquel, his wife. At that moment, I felt a warm tenderness. I even thought how sweet it was that they were leaving work together. But that feeling vanished the second she started speaking. Her first words cut straight through my heart. "Are you absolutely sure no one will suspect anything when it happens?" she asked in a cold, unfamiliar voice. "Raquel, we've gone over this 1,000 times. The plan is flawless. Mom will die in a very natural, very believable accident. No one questions it when an old woman slips and falls in her own house," Javier replied calmly. The air left my lungs. I felt dizzy with shock. I was listening to my own son, my only child, the boy I had raised alone since his father died when he was just 8, planning my death. "And after the funeral, once everything settles, we'll sell that old house and move into the neighborhood we've always wanted. That house alone is worth $200,000, and with her savings on top of that, we'll finally live the life we deserve," Raquel said with disturbing excitement. My mind went blank. That old house was the place where I had given up everything for Javier. Every room held memories of late nights when he was sick, birthdays with simple gifts but endless love, and afternoons spent helping him with homework at the kitchen table. "Alvin and Patricia are on board too, right?" Javier asked. Hearing those names shattered me even more. Alvin was my older brother, and Patricia was his wife. "Of course they are," Raquel answered. "Your uncle is desperate for money since he lost his job. And Patricia keeps saying your mother has always been stingy with them. She thinks it's time the family finally gets what it deserves." Stingy. That word echoed painfully in my head. I had been cleaning houses since I was 18 just to support my son. I sold my wedding jewelry to pay for his college. I denied myself everything so he would never go without. "The life insurance will help too," Javier added casually. "That's another $100,000 we'll collect without any trouble." At that moment, I realized the sweet boy I had raised was completely gone. Silent tears ran down my face as I stayed hidden in the back seat, praying they wouldn't notice me. My body shook, not just from fear, but from a grief so deep it felt like it might tear me apart. They kept talking for several more minutes, calmly discussing every detail of how they planned to kill me, when it would happen, how it would look like an accident, and even how they would cry at my funeral so no one would ever suspect the truth. When they finally stepped out of the car and walked away as if nothing had happened, I stayed hidden for another 10 minutes before I dared to move. When I finally climbed out, I was no longer the same woman who had climbed in. The loving, trusting mother had been left behind in that back seat. My legs shook as I walked toward my old car, knowing I now had to make a decision that would change my life forever. I drove home in complete shock, tears blurring my vision and my heart shattered into pieces. I couldn't accept what I had just heard. My own son, the center of my entire life, wanted me dead for money. But to truly understand this betrayal, you need to know how everything began. My story with Javier started 35 years ago, when he was born into deep poverty. His father, Robert, died in a construction accident when Javier was only 8. He left us with no insurance, no savings, nothing except a small, worn-down house we had bought through years of sacrifice. In one instant, I became a single mother with a young child to raise and only a high school education to rely on. I began cleaning houses at the age of 20. Every morning at 5, I prepared breakfast for Javier, took him to school, then spent the entire day driving across the city cleaning offices, homes, and apartments, anything that would bring money in. My hands grew cracked from harsh chemicals. My back bent from carrying heavy buckets. Still, I never complained. Javier was a gifted student, always at the top of his class. His teachers often told me he had a brilliant future and that I must make sure he went to college. From that moment on, those words became my purpose. Every dollar I earned, I saved carefully for his education. When he turned 15, he needed a computer for school. Other parents bought one easily, but for me it meant 3 months of work. I sold my wedding ring, the last precious memory I had of Robert, to buy it. Javier never knew what I gave up, and I never told him. I didn't want him to feel guilty. During his final year of high school, private universities began sending brochures about their law programs. Javier had decided he wanted to be a lawyer, and I was ready to do anything to make that dream real. The tuition was $20,000 a year, an impossible amount for a woman like me. I went to my brother Alvin and begged him to help, even if only with part of the cost. I promised to repay him with interest. His answer was cold. "Lydia, I won't risk my savings on your son's impossible dreams. He should get a job and forget about becoming a professional." His words hurt deeply, but they didn't stop me. I took a second job cleaning a veterinary clinic at night. I worked from 5 in the morning until 11 at night, every single day. My body was exhausted, but my will never broke. I also began selling homemade food on weekends, tamales, empanadas, cakes, anything that could earn extra money. Javier helped sometimes, but I always told him, "Your only job is to study. Leave the rest to me." At last, I saved enough for his first year of college. The day I went with him to enroll, I cried with happiness when I saw his name on the official papers. My son was going to be a lawyer. Every sacrifice had been worth it. Those college years were the hardest of my life. I worked as much as 14 hours a day to keep up with payments. There were months when I barely had money for food, but I always made sure Javier had everything: books, supplies, spending money. I didn't want him to feel different from his wealthy classmates. In his 3rd year, Javier began dating Raquel, a classmate from a rich family. Her father owned several businesses, and she was used to a lifestyle I could barely imagine. At first, I worried Javier might feel inferior, but he seemed happy and in love. Raquel was polite with me, but from the beginning I felt a cold distance from her. Whenever she visited my home, her eyes silently judged everything: the old furniture, the peeling paint, the small kitchen where I cooked simple meals. She never said anything outright, but her expression said enough. After graduation, Javier was hired by a prestigious law firm. His very first paycheck was more than what I earned in 3 months. I felt proud, and finally relieved, believing I could rest after so many years of struggle. He married Raquel in a stylish ceremony that took all of my remaining savings. She had demanded a wedding that matched their social status. Even though it left me with nothing, I agreed because I wanted my son to be happy. At the reception, I overheard guests whispering about the groom's humble mother with quiet contempt. I pretended not to hear. After the wedding, Javier visited less and less. Raquel always had explanations: work trips, social events, obligations with her family. When they did come, they spoke only about their expensive apartment, luxury restaurants, and plans for an even bigger house. I kept working part-time. By 60, my body could no longer endure the long hours I once survived. Over the years, I had managed to save about $50,000, money I kept only for emergencies or in case Javier ever needed it. My relationship with my brother Alvin also grew worse with time. After Javier became successful, Alvin began making sharp, sarcastic comments about how some people are lucky enough to have children who rise in life. Patricia was even worse. She constantly hinted that I had been selfish for spending everything on Javier's education instead of helping the rest of the family. But the most painful thing was watching how Javier himself was changing. His values shifted. The way he spoke changed. Even the way he dressed was different. Sometimes, when he talked to me, I heard a tone of superiority in his voice that crushed my heart. It felt like he was ashamed of where he came from. 6 months ago, Javier and Raquel began talking about buying a house in one of the most exclusive areas of the city. The prices were over $500,000, an amount I couldn't even understand. When I asked how they planned to afford it, Javier gave vague answers about investments and business deals. Around that time, I also noticed how often money came up during their visits. Casual questions about the value of my house. About my savings. About whether I had life insurance. Back then, I thought it was just a son worrying about his mother's future. Now, sitting alone in my kitchen after hearing that horrifying conversation in the car, everything suddenly made sense. Javier's changes. The money questions. Raquel's influence. Alvin and Patricia's involvement. All of it had been part of a dark plan that had been forming for months. My own son, the one I had given my entire life to, wanted to kill me for my money. The cruelty of the irony was unbearable. Every dollar they wanted me dead for had been earned for the sole purpose of giving him a better life. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay staring at the ceiling, replaying every word of that wicked conversation. Over and over, I heard Raquel's cold voice discussing my death like a business deal. I heard my son calmly agreeing to the details of how I would die. At dawn, something inside me hardened. If they were willing to play dirty, then so was I. But first, I needed to understand exactly who I had become to them. I made a decision I had never made before in my life: I would spy on my own family. Over the next several days, I carefully watched Javier and Raquel. I parked near their apartment in the mornings. I followed them from a distance when they went out. When they visited me, I listened closely to every word they said. What I discovered was even worse than I expected. Their lifestyle was impossible to maintain with their income. Javier earned about $6,000 a month as a lawyer, which was good money, but Raquel had stopped working after the wedding. Their spending was extreme. They dined at restaurants where a single meal cost over $200. Raquel bought designer handbags worth thousands. Their rent alone was $3,000 a month. I also learned they were drowning in debt. One day, I overheard Javier arguing on the phone with a bank over late credit card payments. They owed more than $50,000 in loans and credit cards, and the interest was growing fast. Their desperation now made sense. I was their escape. My $200,000 house. My $100,000 life insurance policy. My $50,000 in savings. Together, it was exactly what they needed to erase their debt and buy their dream home. But the most devastating discovery was learning that my brother Alvin hadn't just agreed to the plan, he was the one who had first suggested it. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the office where Patricia worked, I overheard a phone call that stole the breath from my lungs. "Lydia has always been so selfish with her money," Patricia said bitterly. "Alvin is right. It's time for the family to get what they deserve. That stingy old woman will die sooner or later anyway. Why wait? We need that money now. Alvin lost his job 3 months ago, and we can't even pay the mortgage." I stood frozen outside the door. My brother had lost his job and never told me. Instead of asking for help, he chose to plan my death. That very night, I went to confront Alvin. I showed up at his house without warning, something I had never done before. My heart pounded as I knocked. When he opened the door, surprise and guilt flashed across his face. "Lydia, why are you here so late?" he asked, not inviting me in. "Alvin, I need to talk to you," I said quietly. "Can I come in?" We went into the living room where Patricia was watching television. She greeted me with her usual coldness. I sat down and went straight to the point. "Alvin, is it true that you lost your job? I asked, watching his face closely. He turned red, and Patricia immediately turned off the TV. How did you find out? He demanded. That doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that you're my brother, and you didn't tell me. Why didn't you ask me for help? Alvin and Patricia exchanged a look that confirmed everything I already suspected. It was clear they had practiced this moment. We didn't want to burden you, Patricia replied with a fake smile. I'm his sister, I said firmly. If Alvin needed help, I would help him. I have savings. At that moment, something dark entered my brother's eyes. It wasn't gratitude. It was resentment. Some savings, he mocked. We all know you have much more than that. You've been hoarding money for years while the rest of us struggled. His words struck me like slaps. I worked 14 hours a day to give my son an education, I said. I didn't hoard anything. I sacrificed everything. Exactly, Patricia snapped cruelly. Everything for Javier. You never cared about helping your own brother. When he needed money for school, you said no. But for your precious son, there was always money. The room filled with tension and hostility. Years of buried anger were spilling out. You don't understand, I said. I just wanted Javier to have opportunities we never had. I wanted to break the cycle of poverty. And what about breaking the cycle of favoritism? Alvin shouted, jumping to his feet. You've always been the favorite, Lydia. Since childhood. Now you act better than us. None of it was true. But they had built a story in their heads where I was the selfish villain and they were the victims. If you needed money so badly, why didn't you just ask me? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Patricia laughed bitterly. So you could hand us charity like beggars? So you could make us feel small like you always do? I have never tried to make you feel inferior, I said. Oh really? Alvin yelled. What about when you bought a house and we were still renting? When Javier graduated and our kids barely finished high school? When you talked about your savings while we struggled just to survive? Every accusation burned with deep injustice. I had worked myself to the bone for every dollar. I had inherited nothing. I had been given nothing. But to them, my hard-earned success was an insult. If you need money, I said desperately, I can lend you $10,000 right now. 10,000? Patricia laughed. We know your house is worth $200,000. You have $50,000 saved. And your life insurance is worth $100,000. And you offer us $10,000 like we're beggars? The exact numbers made my blood run cold. They knew far too much. How do you know all of that? I whispered. They fell silent, but their faces answered me. They had already exposed themselves. I stood up on shaking legs. I have my answer now, I said, heading for the door. Lydia, wait. Alvin shouted behind me. But I was already walking away. That night, everything I feared was finally confirmed. My own family saw me as nothing more than an obstacle standing between them and the money they believed was rightfully theirs. It wasn't just Javier and Raquel anymore, it was a whole family plot, quietly growing for months. The next few days were the darkest of my life. I was trapped in a nightmare I could never have imagined, knowing my own family wanted me dead, yet unable to turn to anyone for help. Who do you tell that your own son is planning to kill you? Who would ever believe something like that? And I had no real proof, only a conversation I had overheard while hidden in a car. I knew I needed solid evidence before taking any step. If I was going to fight them, I had to be fully prepared. I began documenting everything. Their routines. Their strange behavior. Their conversations. Their visits. Every small detail that could one day become proof. I also made a terrifying decision, one I knew was necessary. I would let them believe their plan was succeeding. If I acted suspicious or confronted Javier again, they might change their strategy and become even more dangerous. So I kept pretending. I remained the same naive, trusting mother they believed me to be. 3 days after my confrontation with Alvin, Javier called and invited me to dinner. His voice was unusually sweet, and knowing what I now knew, it sent chills through my body. "Mom, Raquel and I want to take you to that Italian restaurant you like so much," he said gently. "We haven't spent much time together as a family lately. We had only gone there once over a year ago, and I hadn't even liked it that much, but I pretended to be excited." "That sounds lovely, son," I said. "Perfect. We'll pick you up Friday at 7. And Mom, wear your favorite green dress. We want you to look nice." That specific request about my dress felt strange, but I didn't question it. After I hung up, I kept wondering why he had mentioned that particular dress. It was one I had bought 2 years earlier, one of the few expensive things I had ever allowed myself. On Friday afternoon, I carefully got ready. I put on the green dress, fixed my hair, and applied a little makeup. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I tried to silence the terrible thought that this could be my last dinner. Javier and Raquel arrived right on time at 7. Javier looked nervous, though he tried to hide it behind forced smiles and small talk about the weather. Raquel, on the other hand, seemed completely relaxed, almost cheerful, which disturbed me even more. During the drive, the conversation felt stiff and unnatural. They spoke about Javier's job, some imaginary vacation plans, and anything except us as a family. I answered automatically, but my mind was focused on watching every movement, every expression. At the restaurant, Raquel insisted that I order the most expensive dish on the menu. "Lydia, tonight is on us." "Don't worry about the price," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. While we ate, they began asking what sounded like harmless questions about my health. "How have you been feeling lately? Any dizziness? Do you have trouble climbing stairs? Have you updated your health insurance recently? Mom, we worry about you living alone in such a big house," Javier added in a concerned tone. "The stairs are steep. What if you fall?" "Oh, don't worry about me," I replied calmly. "I've lived there for 30 years. I know every step by heart." "But accidents don't care how long we've lived somewhere," Raquel said softly. "Maybe you should think about moving to a single-story apartment. Something safer, for your age." The way she said the word accident sent a shiver through me, as if she were testing how it sounded aloud. Then Javier said, "Mom, have you thought about making a will? I know it's uncomfortable, but it's important to keep things in order." There it was. The true purpose of this dinner. They wanted to secure the will before killing me. "Well, I do have a basic will from a few years ago," I said, half lying. "And everything goes to you, of course." Javier and Raquel exchanged a quick glance of satisfaction. It lasted less than a second, but it said everything. "That's good, Mom," Javier said. "But maybe you should have it reviewed. Laws change. We just want to be sure your wishes are followed exactly." "And since Javier is a lawyer," Raquel added sweetly, "he could take care of it for you." The irony was unbearable. The son who planned to kill me now wanted to prepare the document that would benefit him after my death. After dinner, they insisted on driving me home. During the ride, the conversation grew even darker. "Mom, if something were to happen to you," Javier said gently, "is there anything specific you'd want us to do with your belongings?" "Why are you talking like that?" I asked, pretending to be annoyed. "I intend to live for many more years." "Of course, Mom," Raquel quickly replied. "We just believe in being prepared." When we reached my house, something strange happened. Instead of saying goodbye at the door as usual, they insisted on walking me inside. "Let us help you up the stairs, Mom. It's dark and you could trip," Javier said, taking my arm. As we climbed, I felt their eyes measuring every step, every railing, every dangerous spot. It was like they were studying a crime scene. Inside, Raquel began walking through the house as if she were inspecting it. "You really should improve the lighting on these stairs," she said. "They're very dangerous." "And Mom," Javier added, "this rug at the top of the stairs is loose. You could easily trip. Each comment felt like another knife in my heart. They weren't just planning my death anymore, they were standing inside my home, calculating exactly how to do it. After they left, I stayed awake all night, shaking, not just from fear, but from a grief so deep it felt like physical pain. My son had eaten with me, laughed with me, pretended to care about my safety, all while planning to murder me. That night, I made the hardest decision of my life. I couldn't just wait for them to act. I couldn't live every day with the terror of knowing it could be my last. I had to take control. But I would do it in a way they would never expect. If they wanted me to have an accident, then that is exactly what they would get. But it would be an accident I controlled completely. I began planning my own fake death. Planning my own death was the most terrifying and surreal experience of my life. I spent entire nights awake, thinking through every detail, every possible mistake, every way it could fail. But I knew it was the only way to expose them and save my life. First, I needed help. And there was only one person in the world I completely trusted, my neighbor Beatrice. She was 70 years old, a lifelong nurse, and my closest friend for more than 20 years. If anyone could help me survive such a plan, it was her. One morning, after making sure no one was watching me, I went to her house with my heart pounding. The moment she opened the door, she knew something was wrong. "Lydia, what's happening?" "You look awful," she said, pulling me inside. We sat at her kitchen table where we had shared coffee hundreds of times. But this conversation was different. "Beatrice, what I'm about to tell you will sound insane, but you have to listen," I said with trembling hands. I told her everything, the conversation in the car, the dinner, the confrontation with my brother, the stair inspection. She listened in silence as her face shifted from shock to horror and then to anger. "My God, Lydia, this is monstrous," she whispered, gripping my hands. "Beatrice, I need your help," I said. "I have a plan, but I can't do it alone." I explained that I wanted to fake my death so realistically that even the paramedics would believe I had died. With her medical knowledge, she could help slow my vital signs enough to make it convincing. "Lydia, this is extremely dangerous," she warned. "If something goes wrong, then I'll die for real," I finished. "But they already plan to kill me. It's only a matter of time." Beatrice closed her eyes, thinking deeply. "We would need specific medicines. The timing would have to be exact. The doses perfectly measured. So, will you help me?" I asked quietly. She looked at me in silence for several long seconds that felt like an eternity. She finally agreed. "Yes," she said, "but we must do this in the safest way possible." Over the next few days, Beatrice and I carefully prepared every detail. Because she had worked at the hospital for many years, she still had trusted contacts there. Through them, she quietly got the medicines we needed. We also selected the emergency responder who would be sent to the house, a young EMT named Ruben. He had only recently finished his training and wouldn't have enough experience to question a complicated medical situation. The plan was risky, but possible. I would take a specific mix of medicines that would slow my breathing and heartbeat to almost nothing. Beatrice would discover my body and call for help. When the paramedics arrived, she would gently guide the situation so that they would confirm my death without doing a deep investigation. Once I was declared dead, my body would be taken to the hospital morgue. There, one of Beatrice's old friends, a pathologist named Dr. Jones, not my brother, had agreed to help us. He would fake the death certificate and allow me to wake up in private after the drugs wore off. After that, I would stay hidden inside a secret room in Beatrice's basement, secretly watching and recording everything my family did after they believed I was gone. The hardest part was handling the legal details. There could be no autopsy. That meant my death had to appear completely natural for a woman my age. Beatrice suggested we claim it was a heart attack, something common and rarely questioned in older people with no known medical issues. 2 weeks after we began planning, we decided the time had come. We chose a Sunday afternoon, knowing Javier and Raquel would be away at her parents' house for their weekly family lunch. That Sunday morning, I woke up feeling strangely peaceful. After weeks of constant fear, I finally felt like I was taking control. I carefully put on my favorite yellow dress, fixed my hair, and even applied a little makeup. If I was going to die, I wanted to look respectable. Beatrice arrived at 2 p.m. carrying a small medical bag. "Are you sure about this, Lydia?" she asked one last time. "I just found her," Beatrice said through fake sobs that sounded painfully real. "I came to check on her." The door was open, and she was lying like this on the floor. After several minutes of examination, I finally heard the words I both feared and expected. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your friend has passed away. It appears to have been a heart attack. At her age, these things can happen very suddenly." From that moment on, Lydia was officially dead. Now the hardest part of my plan truly began, watching how my family would react to the news of my death. I woke up in Beatrice's basement feeling completely confused. My mouth was dry as sand, and my body felt heavy and strange as the effects of the medicine slowly faded. Beatrice sat beside me, watching my recovery with the same care she had shown throughout the entire process. "How do you feel?" she asked, helping me sit up. "Like I really died," I whispered hoarsely. She nodded. "It worked perfectly. They officially declared you dead. The death certificate is already signed. Lydia Monroe died yesterday at 3:45 in the afternoon from a sudden heart attack." The truth of it hit me hard. I no longer existed legally. I had become invisible, free to watch my family without them knowing I was still alive. "Did you call Javier?" I asked. Even saying his name hurt. "Yes. I called him last night after they took you to the hospital. His reaction was disturbing." Beatrice showed me her phone. She had recorded the call. With shaking hands, I pressed play. "Javier, this is Beatrice, your mother's neighbor. I have very sad news. Your mother passed away this afternoon." There was a long silence. When he finally spoke, his voice wasn't shocked or broken. It sounded relieved. "Oh my God, what happened?" he asked, though his surprise felt forced. "It was a heart attack. The paramedics said it happened quickly. She didn't suffer." "I see. Thank you for calling me, Beatrice. Raquel and I will head to the hospital and handle everything." "I'm so sorry, Javier. I know how much you loved your mother." Yes, it's a terrible loss," he replied. "But my mom had been having some health problems lately. I guess it was her time." That lie cut through me like a knife. He was already building a story to justify my death. When the recording ended, I broke down. His cold voice, the fake concern, the easy acceptance, it all proved they truly had planned my death. "There's more," Beatrice said softly. "Before everything happened, I placed hidden cameras in your house. I wanted to record what they'd do when they went to collect your things." She opened her laptop. On the screen, I saw my living room, silent and empty. It felt surreal watching my own home, knowing it no longer belonged to me. "When do you think they'll come?" I asked. "Probably today. People rarely wait when money is involved." She was right. Around noon, we heard keys in the door. Javier, Raquel, Alvin, and Patricia walked in together like a perfectly organized team. What I saw next shattered me. There were no tears. No silence. No sign of grief. They didn't even pause to respect the house I had lived in for 30 years. They immediately began inspecting my belongings like buyers at an auction. "Well, finally," Patricia said with clear relief. "I thought this day would never come." "Patricia," Javier said, but his voice wasn't truly scolding. "We just lost my mom." "Oh please," Raquel said coldly. "We all know this had to happen. Your mother lived her life. Now we get to live ours." Alvin was already searching the kitchen cabinets. "Where do you think she kept the bank papers?" "Check my bedroom desk," Javier replied. "She always kept things organized." I watched them move through my home like vultures, touching my things, judging their value, planning how to divide my life. It felt like watching strangers tear me apart. Raquel opened my jewelry box. This gold chain could be worth something. And these earrings, old, but maybe someone would buy them. Sentimental value doesn't pay bills, Patricia sneered. Focus on what actually brings money. Javier found my documents exactly where I had always kept them. Here they are. Savings account, $3,000. Checking, $8,000. And here's the life insurance. How much? Alvin asked eagerly. $100,000. I'm the sole beneficiary. Perfect, Raquel said. With that, the savings, and the house sale, we'll buy the new place and clear all our debts. And our share? Patricia asked sharply. Of course, Javier said quickly. As agreed. You get a quarter. Listening to them divide my inheritance while my body was still in the morgue was unbearable. But the worst moment was still coming. Alvin picked up a family photo from my nightstand, one of the few pictures where we were all together at Christmas 5 years earlier. Without a second thought, he threw it into the trash. We don't need useless sentimental junk, he said. He's right, Raquel agreed. We need to be practical. Then Patricia said the words that hurt me more than anything else. Honestly, I'm surprised it took her so long to die. With how stubborn she was, I thought she'd live to 90 just to annoy us. They all laughed. They laughed at my death. At that moment, any doubt I had about my plan completely vanished. Javier pulled out his phone and made a call. Morrison Real Estate? This is Javier Ruiz. I need an urgent appraisal for a quick sale. The owner passed away yesterday. I want the house listed this week. They hadn't even planned a proper funeral. When Raquel asked about the arrangements, Javier said, simple cremation. No wake. No ceremony. It's faster and cheaper. And if anyone asks why there's no wake? Alvin said. We'll say it was her last wish, Javier replied without hesitation. They were stealing even my dignity in death. For 3 hours, they went through my house, listing valuables, assigning belongings, planning the sale, treating my life like spoiled goods. When they finally left, my home had been completely violated. That night, as I replayed the footage again and again, I made my final decision. Exposing their murder plot would not be enough. They would pay, for every cruel word, every cold glance, and for every piece of my life they had tried to erase with their greed. Beatrice, I said firmly, I need your help with the second part of the plan. She looked at me carefully. What are you thinking? Even before I answered, her face showed she already expected something dramatic. I'm going to come back from the dead at the most humiliating moment possible for all of them. And when I do, the whole world will see exactly what kind of people they really are. My family thought they had won the lottery with my death. What they didn't know was that the real lottery was only just beginning, and they had chosen the wrong number. The next few days were an emotional storm. I moved between overwhelming rage and a cold, unshakable determination I never knew I had. From my hiding place in Beatrice's basement, I continued to watch every move my family made through the hidden cameras. I recorded every cruel conversation and every heartless decision they made about my so-called inheritance. Beatrice installed even more discreet cameras in key places, Javier's office, Alvin's house, even inside Raquel's car. Her years as a nurse had taught her precision, and that same precision now shaped our secret operation. On the morning of the third day, Beatrice called me over to her laptop. Lydia, you need to see this. On the screen, I saw Javier in his office, sitting at his desk and speaking on the phone with a smile that turned my stomach. Yes, Mr. Davis, I understand the insurance process is fast when a death is from natural causes. Yes, a heart attack. No autopsy. The doctor said it was completely normal for a woman her age with her stress history. How long until the payout? 1 week? Perfect. What shocked me most was how casual he sounded. There was no sadness, no hesitation, nothing you would expect from a man who had just lost his mother. He sounded like someone closing a simple business deal. As soon as he hung up, he called another number. "Raquel, it's me. Good news. The insurance will be processed this week. $100,000, clean. Yes, I already contacted the real estate agency. They're coming tomorrow to appraise the house." "What?" "No, I haven't thought about feelings. We have to be practical." That last sentence shattered me. I had supposedly been dead for only 3 days, and he didn't have time for feelings. But what truly pushed me fully into the final stage of my plan was another recording we captured that same afternoon, this one between Raquel and Patricia at a cafe downtown. "You know what the best part of all this is?" Raquel said as she sipped her latte. "We finally got rid of that burden. Javier always felt guilty for not visiting her more, for not giving her more money. Now he can live without that pressure." "Oh yes," Patricia said happily. "And the best part is that no one will ever suspect a thing. It was Alvin's perfect plan. A woman in her 60s dying of a heart attack, who's going to question that?" "Exactly," Raquel said. "And now we all win. You and Javier get your dream house. Alvin pays off his debts. And I can finally stop pretending I ever liked that bitter old woman." Hearing her call me a bitter old woman, after years of treating her like my own daughter, completely destroyed the last trace of love I still held for any of them. Whatever maternal or family feelings remained in my heart vanished in that moment. That night, I turned to Beatrice and said, "You have contacts in the media, don't you?" "A few." "Why?" "Because I want my return to be public. I don't want them finding out in private, where they can make excuses or twist the story. I want the whole world to see them for who they really are." For the first time since this nightmare began, Beatrice smiled. "I have a friend at Channel 7 News," she said. "Her name is Maria Elena Vargas. She's an investigative reporter, and she loves stories like this." "Perfect. When can we meet her?" The very next night, Maria Elena came to Beatrice's house, making sure no one had followed her. She was in her 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and the restless energy of a true journalist. "Mrs. Monroe," she said after we explained everything, "this is unbelievable. If you truly have the evidence you claim, this could be the story of the year." We showed her all the video and audio recordings we had collected. I watched as her professional skepticism slowly turned into pure outrage. "This is monstrous," she whispered after watching the clip where Patricia suggested they had been waiting for my death for years. "And they're planning a formal meeting to divide the inheritance," I added. "When will that meeting take place?" she asked. "Probably next Saturday. That's when the whole family is usually available." Maria Elena closed her notebook and looked me straight in the eyes. "Mrs. Monroe, if we go forward with this, there's no turning back. Once this airs, your life, and your family's lives, will change forever." "They already changed forever the day they decided to kill me for money," I replied without hesitation. Now I wanted the entire world to see who they truly were. Over the next few days, Maria Elena and her team prepared everything for what they called the most dramatic return ever shown on local television. They placed more hidden cameras inside my house, coordinated with the police so officers would be ready to arrest my family for conspiracy, and even arranged for a judge to be present during the reveal. The plan was simple but devastating. My family would gather at my house on Saturday afternoon for the official reading of the will. While they discussed how to divide my inheritance, I would walk through the front door, along with television cameras, police officers, and all the proof of their betrayal. On Friday night, Javier called each family member to confirm the meeting. "Tomorrow at 3 p.m. at Mom's house," he told them. "Bring your ID. The lawyer needs to verify the legal heirs." That lie about the lawyer made my blood boil. There was no lawyer. They only created that story to make the meeting sound official. That night, I barely slept, not from fear, but from anticipation. After days of betrayal, pain, and humiliation, justice was finally coming. More than justice, the full truth would be exposed for everyone to see. Saturday morning, I got ready with care. I wore the red dress I had bought for Javier's wedding. I did my makeup, fixed my hair, and made sure I looked perfect. If I was going to rise from the dead, I wanted to look radiant. "Are you ready?" Beatrice asked while checking the recording equipment one last time. "I've been ready since the moment I heard my own son planning my death," I answered calmly. "Today they'll learn that Lydia Monroe is not so easy to kill." Maria Elena arrived with her camera crew at 2 p.m. "They're already arriving at your house," she told me. "Your brother and sister-in-law just got there. Javier and Raquel are parking now." On the screens, I watched my family walk into my house for the last time, believing they were heirs. They had no idea that within an hour, their lives would turn into a public nightmare. "Mrs. Monroe," Maria Elena said, "in a few minutes you'll face the people who planned your death. Do you have anything specific you want to say to them?" For the first time in weeks, I smiled. "Oh yes. I have a lot to say." At 3:15 p.m., I watched them through the hidden cameras as they settled into my living room to divide my inheritance. I felt a mix of nerves and strength I had never felt before. Years of sacrifice, humiliation, and pain had all led to this moment. Javier was sitting in my favorite armchair, the same chair where I used to read him stories as a child. He held a folder of documents and looked satisfied. Raquel sat beside him in a new dress that likely cost more than I spent on clothes in a whole year. Alvin and Patricia sat on the sofa, their eyes filled with greed. Patricia even had a notebook, writing down numbers as if this were a business meeting. "Well," Javier began in a serious but fake voice, "we're here to discuss the distribution of my mother's assets. As you all know, she named me the sole heir. But as a family, we agreed to divide everything more fairly," Raquel added with a cold smile. Maria Elena gently touched my shoulder. "This is the perfect moment. They're saying exactly what we expected." I took a deep breath and walked toward my front door with 2 camera operators, a sound technician, 2 police officers, and Maria Elena beside me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought the whole neighborhood could hear it. "Are we recording?" I asked. "Yes," the cameraman said. "We're live." Those words gave me the final strength I needed. Thousands of people were about to witness real justice. I slowly turned the key in the lock. The sound echoed through the house. Inside, the voices in the living room suddenly stopped. "Did you hear that?" Patricia asked nervously. "It's probably the wind," Alvin replied, but his voice was unsure. I opened the door and walked straight into the living room where they were discussing how to spend the money from my supposed death. The cameras followed me, capturing every second. The silence that followed was terrifying. Raquel saw me first. Her face turned white, and she screamed. "Oh my God, it can't be." Javier jumped up so fast he knocked the papers to the floor. His eyes were wide with terror. "Mom, but you're dead." Patricia began crying hysterically, not from joy, but from fear. "It's a ghost. It's a ghost. Lydia is dead. We saw the death certificate." Alvin stood frozen like a statue. His mouth was open, but he couldn't make a sound. "Hello, my dear family," I said calmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Maria Elena stepped in behind me with the cameras. "Good afternoon," she said. "I'm Maria Elena Vargas from Channel 7 News, and we are broadcasting live one of the most shocking stories of the year." "What is happening?" Javier shouted, his voice shaking with panic. "What's going on, my dear son?" I said calmly as I walked into the center of the room. "I've come back from the dead to personally listen to how you were planning to divide my money." "But, the hospital, the death certificate, you were cremated," Raquel stuttered, shaking with fear. "Ah yes, the cremation," I said with a cold smile. "Interesting how you chose that option because it was cheaper and faster, without even holding awake. Isn't that right, Raquel?" The cameras caught the exact moment her face drained of color as she realized I knew everything. Mrs. Monroe, Maria Elena said, turning to me, can you explain to our viewers why you faked your own death? I looked straight into the cameras. I did it because I discovered that my own family was planning to murder me for my money. That's a lie. Javier shouted, his voice trembling with panic. A lie? I said quietly. Like this? I pulled out my phone and played the recording from his car, his voice and Raquel's voice discussing every detail of my planned death. As the audio played, their shock turned into pure terror. Raquel began sobbing, not from regret, but from fear. That recording is fake. Patricia screamed. She made it up. Fake? I replied, pulling out another phone. Then what about this one, Patricia? The conversation you had with Raquel at the cafe yesterday? I played the recording where she openly talked about how they had been waiting for my death for years and how no one would ever suspect a thing. Alvin finally spoke, his voice shaking. Lydia, this is all a misunderstanding. We'd never do this. A misunderstanding? I laughed bitterly. Was it also a misunderstanding when you all came to my house and divided my belongings like vultures? Was it a misunderstanding when Javier contacted the insurance company to collect my policy? Maria Elena turned the microphone toward Javier. Mr. Ruiz, how do you explain these recordings where you are clearly heard planning your mother's death? Javier was dripping with sweat, his hands shaking. This is a setup. Someone is trying to destroy our family. A setup? I answered. Like the one you four created to destroy me? Like the deal where you promised Alvin and Patricia a quarter of my money in exchange for their silence? At that moment, one of the officers stepped forward. Javier Ruiz, Raquel Ali, Alvin Monroe, and Patricia Taylor, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. No. Raquel screamed. This isn't real. She's dead. We watched her die. You didn't see me die, I said. You saw me act, and I acted much better than you ever pretended to love me. As the handcuffs clicked shut around their wrists, Maria Elena continued filming. Mrs. Monroe, how does it feel to confront the people who planned to kill you? It feels like justice, I said, looking directly at the cameras. For 35 years, I worked myself to exhaustion for my son. I sold my jewelry, gave up my life, and gave him everything. And he repaid me by planning my death for money. Javier looked at me in desperation. Mom, please. This is a mistake. I love you. I always have. You love me? I said through tears I refused to hide. You don't plan to kill someone you love for $200,000. You don't celebrate their death. You don't rush their cremation to save money. That's not true. Enough. I shouted. I heard everything. Your plans. Your jokes about my death. Patricia saying she was surprised I hadn't died sooner. How you divided my money before my body was even cold. The tears finally fell, but they were tears of release, not weakness. I turned to Maria Elena. Let the city hear this, family isn't always about blood. Real family is the one that loves you when you're weak, not the one that celebrates your death. As the police led them away, Javier shouted, This isn't over, Mom. We'll fight this. No, Javier, I answered calmly. This ended the moment you decided your mother was worth less than money. When the house finally went quiet, Maria Elena ended the broadcast. This has been one of the most shocking stories of my career, a mother who faked her death to expose a family that planned to kill her. Channel 7 News signing off. I sat back in my favorite chair, the same one Javier had used to plan my inheritance just an hour earlier. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. Beatrice sat beside me. How do you feel? Like I've finally woken up from the worst nightmare of my life, I said. Like the real Lydia Monroe has returned. The months that followed felt like life in a completely new world. The story went viral within hours across the entire country. My phone never stopped ringing. News outlets, documentary producers, authors, everyone wanted a piece of the story. Even a film company contacted me. But what mattered most was this: after decades of silent sacrifice, the world finally heard my voice. Thousands of women messaged me, sharing stories of giving everything to their families only to be betrayed. Without trying, I had become the voice of mothers who were never appreciated. The legal case moved quickly. The recordings were impossible to deny. Javier, Raquel, Alvin, and Patricia were charged with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, ensuring. The most painful moment came when Javier testified. His lawyer claimed I had been a controlling, manipulative mother who emotionally trapped her son with guilt. My client felt suffocated by years of emotional pressure, the lawyer argued. Mrs. Monroe used her sacrifices as a weapon to control him. Hearing their lies in court broke my heart all over again. They had turned my unconditional love and sacrifices into something toxic and manipulative. In their version, I was the villain, and they were the victims of my so-called maternal tyranny. But when it was my turn to speak, I told my side. In a firm yet emotional voice, I recounted every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every extra job I had taken to give Javier the best life possible. I explained how I had sold my wedding ring to buy him his first computer, worked 14 hours a day to pay for college, and set aside my own happiness to ensure his. Your Honor, I said, looking directly at the judge, I never blackmailed my son with my sacrifices. I hid them from him so he wouldn't feel guilty. I wanted him to live freely, to be happy, to start a family of his own. I never imagined that freedom would lead to plotting my death. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when the prosecutor played the full recordings of the conversations we had captured. Hearing their cold, calculated voices discussing my death, now in a courtroom full of people, was both devastating and liberating. When Patricia's voice said she was surprised it had taken me so long to die, I noticed several jurors wiping tears from their eyes. When Raquel referred to me as that burden they finally got rid of, even the judge paused to collect himself. Javier broke down crying, but I couldn't tell if it was remorse or fear of the consequences. The verdicts came after just 3 hours of deliberation, guilty on all charges. Javier received 20 years, Raquel 15, Alvin 12, and Patricia 10, the shortest sentence for her role, but still held accountable. None of them looked at me as the judge read their sentences, heads down, finally facing the reality of their actions. After the trial, I approached Javier one last time before he was taken away. My son, I said softly, I want you to know that despite everything, I remember the sweet boy you used to be. He looked at me, tears in his eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I became. You became someone who valued money over his mother's life, I replied. Perhaps these years in prison will remind you who you were before greed consumed you. Those were our last words. The following months were about rebuilding my life. I sold the house where I had lived for 30 years, it held too many painful memories. With the proceeds, I bought a smaller, beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood near Beatrice's. I made a choice that reshaped my view of wealth. I donated most of my savings to a foundation that helps single mothers fund their children's college education. If money had been what motivated my family to plan my death, I would use it to do good instead. With the income from my story rights, I established a scholarship fund in my name. Every year, 5 working mothers receive full financial assistance to send their children to college. Pain had created something positive. Fraud, and planning a homicide for money. Their lawyers tried to argue that the recordings were illegal. But the judge ruled that they were recorded in my own home, and that my life had been in danger. The evidence was allowed. But the most profound change came from finding a new family. Through the letters and messages I received, I connected with mothers betrayed by ungrateful children, siblings abandoned by greedy relatives, elderly people exploited by their own kin. We formed a chosen family, a support network that celebrated love and loyalty. One woman became especially important, Gabrielle, 58, whose daughter had abandoned her in a nursing home after taking her savings. Gabrielle became the sister I had always longed for. The most ironic thing, she once said over coffee in my new kitchen, is that our biological families betrayed us for money, but we found better families where money had nothing to do with love. She was right. My life now was full of people who loved me for me, not for my wealth. People who would mourn me genuinely when my real death came, rather than celebrate my inheritance. 2 years after my resurrection, I received a letter from Javier in prison. For handwritten pages of apology, the first time his words felt sincere in decades. He wrote about his therapy, the remorse he felt, and how he finally understood the depth of my sacrifices. "Mom," he wrote on the last page, "I know I can never undo what I did. I know you may never forgive me. But every day in this cell, I remember the incredible woman who raised me, and I hate myself for being blind to your love." I read the letter over and over, debating whether to respond. In the end, I wrote back, not to forgive, but to close that chapter. "Javier, I accept your apology because I believe it is sincere. Forgiveness, however, is something you must earn, perhaps for the rest of your life. The boy I raised is buried under the man who planned my death, and only you can decide if he's worth unearthing." I never received a response, and that was fine. At 65, I can honestly say I am happier than I've been in decades. My home is filled with the laughter of my chosen family. My days are full of meaningful work, my nights filled with peace. People often ask if I regret faking my death. Could I have confronted my family less dramatically? My answer is always the same: they chose the most dramatic betrayal. I merely defended myself with their own medicine. The most important lesson I learned: true family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love. My biological son betrayed me for money, but I found daughters, sisters, and even grandchildren in the people who came into my life after my resurrection. I also learned that it's never too late to start over. At 62, when most people think their lives are already written, I had the chance to be completely reborn. I didn't just fake my death, I faked my rebirth. And I discovered that justice doesn't always come from a judge or a jury. Sometimes, it comes from the truth being exposed for all to see. My family's betrayal was punished not by courtrooms, but by the world witnessing their cruelty. The money they were willing to kill me for became the cost of lawyers they couldn't afford to save them. Tonight, as I write the final lines of my story, I look out the window of my new home at a garden I planted with my own hands. The flowers bloom not from bitterness or revenge, but from hope and the promise of a new life. My name is Lydia Monroe. I'm 65 years old, and this is the story of how I died to truly live. To every mother out there who feels betrayed by the family she sacrificed everything for, it's never too late to find the love and family you deserve. True family isn't always the one who gives us life, it's the one who makes life worth living. Did you like my story? I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Let's meet in the comments. If this story touched you, you can support me with a super thanks so I can keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you for your kind support, it means the world. On the screen, you'll see 2 more life stories I highly recommend. There's so much more waiting for you on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next life story. With love and respect.